Hello and welcome back to the Invest podcast. Very excited to be here today, Jack. We're doing an afternoon recording rather than our usual nighttime slot, so a bit different in our circadian rhythm where we're recording. So it's good stuff. But I'm Isaac, your host, and this is Jack. Jack, say hello.
Yeah, hi everyone. Welcome back. Another week, another Invest podcast.
Yes, I know it's good to be here, and today we're talking and tackling, I would say, a really important broad topic, which is reflective practice. The idea that we can learn from the past, not dwell on it, and move forward. So the structure of our podcast is always something that Jack and I did during the week, something new that's sort of in the self-improvement realm, but it doesn't always have to be. It can be something we learn from, anything that we've tried. And then we get into our core topic, which is reflective practice today. So Jack, what did you do this week? What is your thing of the week?
My thing this week is that I switched up my routine a little bit in the sense that when I finish work, which is normally quite late, maybe about 9 o'clock-ish, give or take, during the week, I'll chill out after having dinner. I'll just watch Netflix or play games or whatever, which is completely fine. That's good. That's time that you've earned to enjoy yourself. But what I've been doing recently is I've actually gone and caught up with mates at that time. Now, initially I thought, well, I'm really tired, doing this, leaving the house after work, you finish late, 9 o'clock or whatever, would be hard. But it's actually been really good because that way I should get time away from the screen because I'm in front of my computer all day working. I'll get off the screen at 9 p.m. and then I will do more screens, right? Which isn't that bad because that's our lives today. But it was nice to switch it up and actually catch up with friends. And I wasn't as tired as I thought because once you get the conversation going and you're in their company, it was great. Then you come home, it's late, and you go straight to bed. And I found I've been getting better sleep as well because I'm actually not necessarily, sitting somewhere for the whole night by myself watching whatever entertainment. I'm actually hanging out with friends and I'm getting that extra time, that socialization time, which I love. So that's what I've done this week. And it's been great fun.
So what do you use for that? Do you go on a Discord? Do you use Zoom? Do you call people? Do you actually physically meet up?
Yeah,
what are you doing
physically. So previously I'd watch Netflix or play games with friends. So I'm still socializing, but over the internet. It was always just through usually Discord, right? But what I'm saying this week I've done is I've actually physically gone and seen them at night. You just pop over to the house, hang out, go out somewhere. There's so many places. There's these tea places you can go that are open till late midnight or whatever. There's all these great things you can do. And even just go for a drive or something. It's been really great because I feel like the nighttime, especially in the week, for me just didn't exist. It was just, I'm just chilling at home, but it's been really great. So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah. I think it's important that we find the ways to socialize no matter what, and catching up with people in person, there's no substitute, right? It's the energy, it's the excitement. It's also don't take it for granted. I mean, not to be sort of pessimistic, but life changes. People move, people change suburbs, people change states, countries, whatever it may be. And when you've got a friend that's in close proximity, and you always struggle to find time to catch up, well, sometimes we've spoken before, you combine activities. Maybe it is going for a walk and having a catch up. Maybe if it's getting later in the evening, you just have that phone call, or you have a Zoom call, something like that, and you talk for 10, 15 minutes, and that can really have positive impacts. So
I've definitely felt I'm a lot happier, and the reason why I brought this up, other than the fact that it was something different, just to kind of put it back on the list and now something practical they can do, is have a think about that time in the evening during the week. I think a lot of people will classify that time in a certain way that will stop them from actually doing things like seeing people, for example. And it's a very forgotten time. I'm talking 8, 9 p.m. or 10 or whatever, even later up till midnight during the week. That is still time you have. Let's say you finish at 5 p.m. and let's say you go to bed at midnight. You have 7 hours there. You could do whatever. You could do extra work. You can catch up with people. You don't have to necessarily sit and chill out, which is fine. But I just wanted to mention that we actually have some time. So if you feel like you haven't got time to see your friends, organize it.
Yeah, absolutely. Always find times, and that comes back to prioritization, which we've spoken about previously,
Absolutely,
prioritizing the social interaction.
All right, what's yours?
I'll get into it. So I guess the premise of mine is that we don't live in an or world. We have to do this or this. We can do both, or we live in an and world. I can do something and I can do something else. And for me, I was thinking often at lunch times or meal times, I watch Netflix or I watch binge or like, watch a movie or a TV series. And I think people would sort of question that and be like, oh, isn't it better to socialize? Isn't it better to maybe do something more productive in your spare time? But as I was saying, we live in an and world. Some days you could watch Netflix at lunch and maybe socialize at dinner, right? We could do both in a day. We don't have to do just one or the other. So what I've started to do is sort of substitute some of my lunch times with having a social conversation. So whilst I'm eating lunch, I'll FaceTime someone and talk while they're having lunch. Or at certain times, I can also, on some days, watch something kind of more meaningful. So I've tried to watch sort of YouTube travel vlogs or learn something on YouTube, like a skill or something along that line. So just using my free time that, acknowledging sometimes I like to just zone out, watch something like Seinfeld or something on Netflix that is super chill. But I can also do other things if I want to, right? I can have a phone call if I feel like it. I can, basically read if I need to, like anything, right? It's that idea that we live in an and world. We can do more than one thing. It's not Netflix is bad, or you have to do this. It's, oh, you could do that some days, but you can also do something else. So yeah, for me, it's been just, that little substitution of some meals I feel like just being insular and watching something, and others I feel like, I can have a conversation, or I can watch something a bit more productive on YouTube. But yeah, how do you sort of use your meal times, Jack?
Well, yeah, no, it's actually interesting. Oftentimes our weekly things will line up well with each other because we don't know what they are. This is our first time, talking about them. So it is interesting. It's similar, I guess. We both during the past week looked at times that we thought we didn't actually have time. Like for example, when you're having lunch, I'm having lunch and I'll just watch the Netflix while I'm waiting and while I'm eating, and that's it. And then meanwhile, me at the end of the day, I'm tired. I'll just watch something or play something and go to bed. But we can actually find time there. There's a lot of undiscovered time throughout our days. But yeah, I mean, with me, I remember actually you told me many years ago that you got to really value that time, like when you eat, for example, like your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and actually be mindful and enjoy that moment. Not to be too spiritual, but obviously, like you want to actually be present in the moment. And yeah, I know me definitely. First thing I do is I'll open YouTube while I'm eating. I feel like everyone nowadays, you kind of can't eat unless there's something in front of you. And literally, I was watching Seinfeld yesterday even. So this is funny timing. And yeah, there was a joke Jerry made about essentially the TV has to be on, otherwise you can't eat. And the reason why that's people don't have to talk to each other. Like there needs to be a screen. And it's kind of true. And that's not a bad thing, but yeah, I understand where you're coming from. You want to make that time a bit more productive, and fair enough. But yeah, with me, with my meal times, I'll just kind of use that as my break, my enjoyment. So instead of working, having a break, then doing lunch, whatever, I'll just work. My break will be my lunch or dinner. And then after that continue. So I kind of use it in that way where I actually don't make it productive, like you're mentioning this week, which is great. I do kind of the opposite, but then by having it as my own time, that means that becomes my break. And then afterwards I can get back to whatever I need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the whole idea of it. We live in a and world. We can do one thing and the other. We don't have to do, it's not binary, right? I think sometimes people like to put blanket rules like every mealtime, you shouldn't have a screen there. You should be talking. And sometimes they also say, oh, like we can't live without like watching something or a screen there, right? I think it's good to incorporate both because and obviously it can depend on your mood, but it's good to incorporate both, change it up. Like if you're someone that you're using meal times to just sort of sit there and stare into the abyss, that's great. Maybe try putting in, a little bit of music or a reading or something like that. Use that time because often, during the day though, it's really nice set apart time that you can just do your own thing, or if you're eating with your family or friends or significant other as well. But Jack, let's get into reflective practice. And I, in my personal line of work, when I teach students, I always tell them when you do a test, when you do any assessment or practice exam, practice test, if you're not reflecting on that, you're not really seeing the full benefits that you could, right? We need to reflect, right? We need to actually focus on what we did well, what we need to improve on, and go through it systematically. And I kind of came up with this little quote: reflection is what enables us to move in the right direction. So along those lines, I wanted to talk about reflective practice, right? So how we reflect on things. And Jack, I want to put it over to you. Maybe you could talk about something that you've utilized, whether it be academic or just life, where you continually reflect and how that's benefited you.
Oh, great question, man. This is a really important topic. So I'm glad you've brought this up for this week. Yeah, I think there's many times where I reflect on stuff. I'll have to take a sec to think about one, but just to broadly talk about it, is just the idea that you do need to reflect in order to improve. So, like you mentioned with that quote, it's to move in the right direction. Unless you actually reflect on you as a person, your behavior, what you're about, what you do, etc., you can't really be as truthful to yourself as possible. Like, it's very hard to look at yourself from, let's say, a third person perspective and actually say, oh, was what I did, for example, the right thing? And it's difficult to reflect because we have to be vulnerable and we have to accept that we're not perfect. And hindsight is the greatest teacher. Like, how many times have you thought back and think, oh, I don't know why I did that, or I should have done this, right? It happens all the time. And that is reflection. And it's hard to do that because you have to admit you're wrong, but you can't be right unless you're wrong in the first place. You can't actually like be good or do the correct thing unless you actually learn what is right and wrong. So yes, it is very important. And with me, with my own life, I try to reflect just in general about a bit of everything. What about you, man? Is there something you reflect on in particular, like the most, like your relationships, for example, or what is it that you like to reflect about?
Yeah, I think for me, it's more in everyday life, like through my studying, like through medicine and studying medicine. Like, I think I continually go through reflection of what I know, what I don't know. And I fell into a trap in the past of dwelling. I think there's a difference between reflective practice and dwelling. Dwelling is like, oh, like I just don't know this. I'm not good at this, and you keep focusing on it. Whereas reflection, I think, is a process. And in psychology, there's something called the Gibbs reflective cycle, where you move past different points. So you go through what the activity was, how you felt when you did it, the evaluation of your performance, analysis, and then how, like, your conclusion of how you're going to improve it. And I think going through a cycle of that, make sure you're not dwelling in that phase of what happened. Right. So let's say that in the hospital, something happened and, I made a mistake, or I wasn't sure how to handle something. Well, I'll reflect on that. I'll be like, okay, what I did at this situation, how I felt, what I could do to improve it, and what are the steps I'm going to go through. Now, that can be time costly for people. Like if you're studying for exams or if you want to improve at something, it does take a bit of time. But through that, you'll refine your practice so that the actual quality of what you do rather than the quantity will be at a much higher value. And that's what I believe. So yeah, Jack, for me, it's something that I think in the medical field we're really taught and it's instilled well. But it's something that I would encourage everyone, and I'm still trying to do as well, apply it to everything like relationships and what I do day to day.
No, that's interesting, man. It's good to hear from you. Always good to hear from your perspective, a young medical professional, mate. So how that works in the day-to-day there. It's great to hear that. And yeah, I think it is important to reflect on pretty much everything, but I like how you said you don't dwell on it. And I think a big part of that is not judging yourself or someone for doing maybe the wrong thing or whatever it may be at that moment, because we look back and we think, oh, if I had known this, I wouldn't have done that. And let's not be too quick to judge ourselves. Like you don't want to look back and think, oh, you see like an old photo and you'll be like, why did I wear that pink striped shirt to this event? Like, what is wrong with it? It's like, hey, don't judge yourself. At the time you thought it was great. Now and that just means you're growing, you're learning, right? So it's a good thing. You can look back and say that was stupid, so let's not judge ourselves too harsh. I think that's an important part of that process. Like you mentioned, it is a process. So that's, I think, a part of it.
Yeah, and Jack, I want to ask a bit on that. Obviously, we both teach students, and a big part of everything is what metric you use to define how you're going, right? So a lot of students will use, I got this percentage on a test, or if you're studying, I got this grade on my assignment or something like that. So how do you sort of separate, I guess, the metric and the grade from actually reflecting? Is it enough to just say, I got 80%, that means I don't know 20%? How do you sort of encourage your students, or how have you worked through it with your own academic endeavors?
That's an interesting point, because that's the first thing. That's the first metric. Like, oh, I got 80%. Last time I got 70. So that means I'm getting better. And yes, that may be true, but maybe not as well. So when we reflect or look at anything, and I guess I can use this academic context as an example, It's like
Yeah.
you need to consider all the co-factors. You need to consider everything. Like maybe just on that day, you had a really crappy day. Maybe you just didn't sleep much. Like a lot of my students are really into sport and they'll stay up till the early morning watching some game in England or something, which is great. And power to them. But maybe that's the reason why you didn't score as well in that particular time. Maybe you're not, getting worse. Maybe it's just those are the other factors you need to acknowledge and improve those things too. So I always try and say to my students that it's not really the grade or like the mark that's the most important thing. Like, yes, it is a metric. Yes, it is a way to quantify your progress, which ultimately you have to do that because you can't just say, oh, I feel good and then now I'm doing great. Well, hang on. Can that result in an output? That means that you're actually achieving the results, right? But ultimately, it's not just the grade. And I have to tell them that a lot because when you're a kid, you're a student, you're a bit younger, you haven't got that perspective perhaps. So yes, I think when it comes to reflecting in academics, but I guess in general, is just consider everything. Like with the pink shirt, it's like, okay, maybe that was a stupid decision, but maybe all my other shirts are in the wash and that's the only one I had. I didn't realize that. So there's a lot of other things you need to consider. So yeah, that's what I tell my students. But what about you, man? Do you just say, hey, don't worry about the grade, it's all good? Or do you have like an approach in that sense as well?
Yeah, and given we're always students, we're always learning something, and I'm actually a student in the academic sense as well. I try and encourage myself, but also students as well, is don't just take things at face value. Like, don't just say I'm reflecting by talking it out loud or thinking in my head, oh yeah, I'm reflecting in my head. Like literally have a process or a system that allows you to reflect, to keep track of things. So I've now gotten through through this system basically of I segment everything I need to work on. I'm keeping track of things, whether that's a checklist or like writing things out in full of the things I need to improve on, how I'm going with things, right? So you could do that through a color coding system, right? Just, classic traffic light, red, amber, green. Like, green is I've done the well from my assessment or from my feedback or from just my own recall. Red is something I need to work on, and just building something, whether that's on Word, on like an app like Notion, or in your notes on your phone, anything, just keeping track of things and actually writing it down, taking that extra 5-10 minutes to do that, I think can see benefits beyond that time investment of 10 minutes, right? So certainly just to maybe make that refined in what I just said, actually taking the time to write out in some way or describe or even it could be like a voice recording or a picture or a diagram, whatever it may be, just getting out your reflection from your head or from the verbiage into something that's tangible and that you can look back on and keep track of, because it's very easy to say from the last, assessment I did, yeah, I'll improve on this. I've got it in my head. And then you get to the exam or whatever it might be, and you've completely forgotten it. Whereas if you can keep track of it, you can keep referring and being like, look, that was red. I needed to look at that. I'm going to try and improve on that. So,
well, yeah, that's a great idea. Like kind of just making note of stuff. And I think if you were to look at reflection as a process with anything, any situation, step one I don't have the answers, maybe more just questions, but perhaps step one is making note of something, because it's very easy to forget, because in that moment you may be like, yep, next time I'm going to remember that and reflect on that, but possibly not. So it applies with anything. Maybe you're in the gym and you want to progressively overload your resistance. So, you whenever you go to the gym the next time, you reflect, think, what did I do last time? I need to improve on that or whatever it may be. But unless you have it written down, unless you have that system, how do you know? Same with your relationships. Maybe you're in a new relationship and you think, okay, my partner, does this person possess the qualities or traits which I deem necessary to have a healthy and sustainable relationship? Well, what was it like last time? We'll often have recency bias too. So it is important it doesn't mean that, when you break up with someone, you write down all the things about them and use that to compare. But it's simply having records. Maybe you have some photos or whatever that can help you remember things. So yes, I think recording information, just in general, obviously, is very important. But in terms of reflection, it actually enables you to look back through almost like a wormhole in time and see what it was like at that time and what you were thinking about and what you would like to reflect on in the future. So yeah, that's definitely something that's really important. It's good to hear you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I might just say my concluding remarks before I flip over to you, Jack, for our summary. a big part of reflection is that it doesn't always have to be individual. You can do it with someone else. Like you can, whether it's a coach, mentor, tutor, teacher, lecturer, whatever it may be, you sometimes can externalize your reflection as well. And they can bounce ideas off each other. And I'll give the example, like when Jack and I do this podcast, we do it, we then always review it or reflect, right? We call each other and be like, look, when we talked about this, maybe we could have gone in more detail with that. Or maybe we'll note it down and be like, that's a topic for another time that we can expand on. And we also rely on you guys out there listening as well. So that's just one example, but it can be anything, right? It could be a uni exam and you want to go through it, but maybe you don't know where to start. And that external force can actually give the little push, or maybe through the expertise can actually tell you which areas you need to focus on. So remembering that, reflection is a process that, you've got to want to be in that reflective state, but it doesn't have to be your journey alone. You can bring externals in to help with you. So yeah, Jack, I'll flip it over to you for
I think this might be my first wrap up of an episode.
Yeah, it's
daunting.
It's exciting. I think we have to share the love.
The bar is set so high. I got the expert rapper here, mate. You may as well work at Subway at this point. But anyway, so to wrap up, here we go. So to wrap up, we started by discussing the things that we improved on or learnt about during the week. So I had me finding time in the evenings after work to catch up with friends instead of just have my own downtime. And I felt that improved my life overall. And I really enjoyed doing that. You also found time yourself while having your breaks, perhaps while eating lunch or dinner, you choosing to do what you may see fit, whether it's talking to other people or watching something a bit more educational rather than an escape. And you brought up this idea, correct me if I'm wrong, it was we live in an all world, not an and world. Is that right?
We live in an and world. We can do this and this. It doesn't have to be that or the other. Doesn't have to be binary. We can do both.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. So you can multitask and choose to do different things. It's not just one or the other. You can actually incorporate that. And then we moved on to the topic of reflection. We discussed pretty much everything. So from the process of reflection, why it's important, how to do it, times when we reflect, and then you kind of concluded bringing up this idea of externalization as well can help you reflect. So, mate, that's the wrap up. You can now do the conclusion.
Love it. We can open up our own Subway franchise if we wish.
So many wraps.
Get the meatball sub going, wrap it up. It's how it goes, man. But yes, thanks to everyone who's given suggestions and followed the podcast journey along. Check us out on Spotify and on YouTube as well. We'll have the video version. I didn't get to hold up anything today to the camera, Jack, but sometimes I do. And it's the way to go. But thank you all for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next episode.